Ethan never believed in the idea of fate, yet something about that summer felt different. He was 24, restless, and caught between who he was and who he wanted to be. His friends were busy building careers, chasing stability, while he remained undecided, juggling part-time jobs and sketching out unfinished dreams. One July evening, while escaping the heat in a quiet bookstore cafe tucked between two tall brick buildings, his life changed in the simplest of ways. That's where he saw her. She sat by the window, sunlight spilling across her hair in copper waves. A book lay open in front of her, though she wasn't reading, she was underlining passages, pausing every so often to bite the end of her pen in thought. She was older than most women he usually noticed, maybe late 20s, maybe early 30s. There was something deliberate in her movements, an elegance wrapped in mystery. Ethan told himself to look away, but his eyes betrayed him. She looked up. Their gazes locked. It wasn't just a glance, it was as if she measured him in a single second, then decided whether he was worth keeping in her sight. A faint, almost knowing smile curved her lips before she returned to her book. That smile didn't leave his mind. The first conversation. 15 minutes later, Ethan found himself wandering near her table under the pretense of browsing books. He pretended to inspect a shelf just behind her, though his nerves buzzed like live wires. Looking for something in particular, her voice broke the silence. It wasn't teasing, nor unfriendly, it was smooth, low, confident. He froze, caught. Turning slightly, he managed a half smile. Just pretending I know what I'm doing. Her brow arched, amused. That's an interesting strategy. Does it usually work? Only about half the time. And the other half? Disaster. This earned him a quiet laugh, soft, but real. She gestured toward the chair across from her. Well, since you've already been hovering, you might as well sit. Saves you from disaster. He hesitated, but only for a moment. My name's Ethan, he said, lowering himself into the seat. Clara, she replied, offering her hand. Her handshake was firm, confident. She held his gaze just a second longer than expected. Enough to unsettle him, enough to intrigue. Small sparks. They spoke casually at first about books, the unbearable summer heat, the bitter coffee the cafe always served. But under the surface, something else stirred. Ethan noticed how Clara leaned forward when she spoke, how she studied him like she was cataloging his reactions. She wasn't shy, nor did she fill silence with nervous chatter. Instead, she left space for him to reveal more, as if she enjoyed watching him fumble for words. When their knees brushed beneath the table, she didn't pull back. Neither did he. It wasn't intentional at first, but once it happened, the awareness lingered. Her presence carried weight, not in a demanding way, but in a way that unsettled the balance of the room. You seem young, she observed suddenly, though her tone was playful rather than critical. Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily. Just noticeable. I'm 24. How about you? She smiled but didn't answer directly. Old enough to know what I want. Young enough to still want it? The ambiguity sparked something in him, curiosity mixed with a slow-burning thrill. An invitation. They stayed in that cafe until closing. When Clara finally stood, Ethan felt an ache at the thought of parting. She slipped her book into a leather satchel and turned to him. Walk me home, she asked casually, as though she already knew he would. The night air was warm, carrying the scent of rain on pavement. They strolled through narrow streets lit by dim street lamps. Conversation flowed effortlessly, sometimes light, sometimes personal. Ethan found himself revealing more than he expected, telling her about his uncertainty, his lack of direction. "You don't strike me as lost," Clara said at one point. "I feel like it," he admitted. "Feeling lost doesn't mean you are. It just means you're searching. There's a difference." Her words clung to him. When they reached her building, a tall, ivy-covered structure with an old iron gate, she paused at the entrance. "This is me," she said. Ethan nodded, unsure what to do next. He didn't want the night to end. She seemed to sense that. Leaning closer, her voice dropped, lower, slower. "If you want to see me again, come back here tomorrow. Same time." And without another word, she slipped inside, leaving Ethan outside with his pulse racing and his mind buzzing. Restless night. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He replayed their encounter, her voice, her smile, the subtle touch of her knee against his. He felt drawn to her in a way that was different from past crushes or fleeting attractions. This wasn't about surface beauty, though Clara was undeniably beautiful. It was about presence, about the way she made him feel like he was being seen, studied, even tested. And deep down, he knew she had the upper hand. The second meeting. The next evening, Ethan found himself outside the cafe 10 minutes early, pacing nervously. When Clara arrived, she carried the same leather satchel, the same composed expression. "You're early," she noted, clearly amused. "I didn't want to be late." "Good." They returned to their table by the window. This time, the conversation shifted into deeper waters: art, desire, the strange line between control and freedom in relationships. Clara spoke with quiet authority, and Ethan found himself both challenged and captivated. At one point, she leaned in close and whispered, "You watch me too much." He blinked, caught again. "Maybe I can't help it?" Her lips curved. "Maybe I don't mind." Tension grows. As the evening wore on, the air between them thickened. Their conversations were laced with subtle innuendo, not crude but charged. When Clara reached across the table to adjust his collar, her fingers lingered just long enough to make his breath catch. "You're easily flustered," she observed. "Is that a bad thing?" "No. It's endearing." Her eyes gleamed with something unreadable. Something dangerous and thrilling all at once. When they walked again, this time she slowed near her building, but instead of stopping at the gate, she turned to him. "Do you always do what people ask of you?" she asked. "Depends on who's asking." "And if it's me?" His throat tightened. "I think I might." Clara studied him in silence, then gave the faintest nod, as if approving a test he didn't know he was taking. "Good night, Ethan," she said softly, stepping inside. And just like the night before, he was left restless, craving more. The next few days became a rhythm Ethan didn't plan but couldn't resist. Work, errands, daily routines, they blurred, became lighter, because his mind was locked on one thing: the evenings with Clara. It wasn't just attraction. It was a pull, a current too strong to fight. Each time they met, she revealed a little more of herself, yet somehow left more unsaid. She wasn't like other women Ethan knew. She didn't rush, didn't try to impress. Instead, she let silence stretch, let glances carry weight, let him feel the edges of her control without her saying it outright. And Ethan he wanted to follow. A question of desire. On their third evening together, she surprised him. They weren't at the cafe. She had suggested a quieter place, a rooftop bar with string lights and soft music playing through hidden speakers. The city spread out beneath them, golden and restless. Clara sipped her wine slowly, her gaze sharp yet relaxed. Ethan felt like a page she was reading, each expression catalogued. "Ethan," she said suddenly, "what do you want?" He blinked. "In life?" "No." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "From me?" The question hung between them like a suspended blade. His pulse jumped. He hesitated, fumbling, his cheeks warming under her steady look. "I don't know yet." She tilted her head. "That's honest. But if you stay near me, you'll need to learn how to answer. Desire is dangerous when you can't name it." He swallowed hard. "Then maybe you can teach me." The faintest smile touched her lips, the kind that was neither kind nor cruel but promising. The first touch. Later, walking her home, the air was heavy with summer humidity. Cicadas hummed in the distance. As they reached her iron gate, Ethan prepared for the usual farewell. But this time, Clara didn't step inside immediately. She leaned closer, her voice low. "Do you want to kiss me?" His breath caught. "Yes." "Then do it." Ethan leaned in, his lips brushing hers, tentative at first, testing. But Clara didn't yield easily. She pressed back, slow and firm, her hand gripping his collar with subtle authority. She kissed him not like someone being kissed, but like someone claiming. When she finally pulled away, Ethan was dizzy. She looked composed, lips barely flushed, eyes sharp. "Better," she murmured. "But don't wait for permission next time." With that, she left him outside again, his whole body humming, every nerve alive. Cracks in routine. Over the following week, Ethan's world shifted. Days felt like filler, the nights with Clara the only reality that mattered. He thought about her at work, imagined her voice in his head, replayed the way her hand had tugged at his collar. She unsettled him. Not in a bad way but in a way that made him question himself. Why was he so drawn to her authority, her composure, the way she seemed to hold him in place with a look? And yet, he didn't resist. He wanted more. Confessions. One evening, rain drizzled softly, streaking the windows of the cafe. They sat close, their knees brushing, the world outside blurred in mist. Clara spoke first. "You look distracted." "I think about you too much," Ethan admitted before he could stop himself. Her lips curved faintly. "That's not necessarily a problem." "It feels like one." "Because you're not used to it." He nodded. "You unbalance me." Clara's hand slid across the table, fingers resting on his wrist. Her touch was light but deliberate. "Good. Balance is overrated." The simplicity of her words made his pulse race. The edge of control. Later that week, they ended up at her apartment for the first time. Clara's home mirrored her elegant, minimal, with books stacked neatly along shelves and soft lamplight spilling warmth across the hardwood floor. Ethan stood near the entrance, unsure. Clara closed the door behind them, then leaned against it, studying him like prey caught in her den. "You're nervous," she said. "Maybe." "Why?" "Because I don't know what you expect." Her eyes gleamed. "I expect you to be yourself. But also, I expect you to listen." She stepped closer, her heels clicking softly, and brushed a hand against his jaw. "You're young. Eager. That's fine. But if you want me, Ethan, you'll need to learn patience." Can you do that? He nodded, though his chest ached with the urge to close the gap, to touch her more. Good. She pulled back just enough to let him feel the loss. Then sit. It wasn't a request. It was a command cloaked in silk. Ethan obeyed, sinking onto the couch as Clara moved gracefully to pour them drinks. The rest of the evening blurred in conversation and subtle tests. She didn't kiss him again, not then, but her presence filled the room, heavy and intoxicating. By the time he left, Ethan felt both starved and satisfied, like she had given him just enough to keep him tethered. Growing obsession. Nights alone became unbearable. Ethan found himself restless, craving her voice, her gaze, the slightest brush of her hand. He knew it wasn't healthy to orbit someone so completely, but Clara wasn't like anyone else. She drew him in deeper with every passing day. Even his friends noticed. "You're somewhere else, man," one of them teased over beers. "Just distracted," Ethan muttered, unwilling to share the truth. Clara felt too personal, too precious to explain. A hint of jealousy. One night at the cafe, another man approached Clara's table. He was tall, confident, clearly someone who knew her. Ethan stiffened, watching the easy way the stranger leaned close, how Clara smiled politely but didn't push him away. Ethan's chest tightened. Something hot and unfamiliar churned in him. Jealousy. Clara noticed. When the man finally left, she turned her gaze on Ethan. "You're frowning." "I didn't like him." "You don't even know him." "I don't need to." For a long moment, Clara studied him, then her lips curved in that knowing smile. "Good. It's about time you showed some fire." Ethan blinked. "You wanted me to be jealous." "Not wanted. Expected. If you care, you fight. Otherwise, it's just a game." Her words struck him hard. He realized then that Clara wasn't simply guiding him into a romance, she was testing him, shaping him, seeing how far he would go. A new boundary. By the end of that night, Clara leaned in close, her lips brushing his ear. "Next time, I want you to come here, not the cafe. Do you understand?" "Yes," Ethan breathed. Her hand squeezed his shoulder, firm, approving. "Good boy." The phrase electrified him. It was more than affection, it was possession. And he knew he wanted it. The following evening, Ethan stood outside Clara's building with his heart pounding. She had told him to come here, not the cafe. The message had been simple, yet it carried weight. Tonight felt different. The old iron gate creaked as he entered the courtyard. The light in her apartment window glowed warm against the night sky. By the time she opened the door, Ethan already felt like he had stepped out of his ordinary life and into her world completely. "Come in," she said smoothly, stepping aside. He obeyed. A different atmosphere. Her apartment looked the same, yet the mood was different. Candles burned on the low table, casting golden light across the walls. Soft music pulsed in the background, slow, rhythmic, a sound that filled the silence without overwhelming it. Clara wore a silk blouse, dark and loose, paired with fitted black trousers. Effortless, elegant. She moved with deliberate grace, pouring wine as though she had all the time in the world. "You're tense," she observed, handing him a glass. "I'm expectant," Ethan admitted. Her smile was slow, deliberate. "Good. Expectation sharpens the senses." They sat across from one another, knees almost touching. She didn't rush the conversation. Instead, She asked him about his day, about his thoughts, letting him stumble through answers while her eyes stayed fixed on him. Every glance felt like pressure, every silence like a test. The first command. At one point, Clara leaned forward, her gaze unblinking. "Take off your jacket." The words weren't harsh, but they weren't optional either. Ethan froze, heart hammering. Slowly, he slipped it off, laying it across the back of the chair. "Better," she murmured, sipping her wine. A thrill coursed through him, not from the action itself, but from the way she said it, the authority beneath her calm tone. The kiss that broke him. When she finally stood, she didn't ask him to follow. She simply extended her hand. Ethan rose immediately, taking it, letting her guide him toward the couch. She sat first, pulling him down beside her. For a long moment, she studied his face, searching his eyes as though measuring whether he was ready. Then she kissed him. It wasn't tentative this time. Her mouth pressed firmly against his, her hand sliding to the back of his neck, holding him in place. Ethan responded hungrily, but Clara kept control, leading the rhythm, deciding when to deepen the kiss and when to pull back. When she finally broke away, his breath came fast, his pulse wild. "You learn quickly," she whispered, her thumb brushing his jaw. "But you still rush." "I can't help it," he murmured. "Yes, you can. Patience, Ethan. Desire isn't about speed. It's about control." Her words burned into him. Touch and restraint. The night stretched on in a blur of heat and restraint. Clara allowed him to touch her arm, her waist, the curve of her hip, but each time he grew bolder, she slowed him, guided him back. At one point, when his hand slipped beneath the hem of her blouse, she caught his wrist firmly. Her eyes locked on his. "Not yet." The firmness in her tone made his stomach tighten with a mix of frustration and longing. She smiled at his reaction, clearly enjoying his struggle. "You want too much too fast," she said softly. "If you let me lead, you'll get more than you imagined. Can you trust that?" "Yes," he breathed. Her smile widened, satisfied. The lesson. Eventually, Clara rose and stood over him, her presence commanding. "Kneel." The word hit him like a spark. He hesitated, breath caught, but something inside him, curiosity, hunger, instinct, pushed him forward. Slowly, he knelt before her, looking up. Clara's gaze softened, though her authority didn't fade. She brushed her fingers through his hair gently, almost affectionately. "That's better," she whispered. "Now you're beginning to understand." Ethan's chest burned with conflicting emotions: vulnerability, desire, surrender, but also a strange sense of rightness. Clara leaned down, pressing a slow kiss to his forehead. "Good boy." The words shivered through him like lightning, breaking the tension. They didn't go further that night. Clara pulled him back to the couch, curling against him with surprising tenderness. They spoke in low voices, about music, about books, about dreams. But underneath it all, the tension remained, sharp and alive. When he finally left, Ethan's body ached with unfulfilled desire. And yet, he was smiling. Clara had given him less than he craved, but far more than he expected. The shift inside him. In the days that followed, Ethan noticed something changing in himself. He felt sharper, more aware, like Clara had lit a flame that wouldn't burn out. He carried her words with him: patience, control, trust. Even at work, he found himself standing straighter, speaking with more confidence. His friends teased him for looking different, though he couldn't explain why. But deep down, he knew the truth: Clara was remaking him. A test of boundaries. The next time he came over, Clara greeted him with her usual calm smile. But something in her eyes hinted at mischief. "Tonight," she said, "I want to see how much you've learned." She led him to the living room, dimly lit as before. Instead of pouring wine, she stood close, tracing her fingertip lightly along his collarbone. "You want to touch me," she said matter-of-factly. "Yes," he admitted. "Then don't." "Not until I say so." The command was torture. Standing so close, inhaling her perfume, watching the curve of her lips, and yet, his hands remained still at his sides. His chest ached with restraint. Minutes passed like hours. Clara circled him slowly, her presence heavy, her voice soft in his ear. "You're trembling. Does it hurt?" "Yes." "Good." At last, she leaned against him, her lips grazing his ear. "Now." Ethan's hands shot forward instinctively, pulling her close. The release of tension was electric, a flood of relief and hunger. Clara's laughter was low, satisfied. "You see," she whispered. "Obedience makes the reward sweeter." Aftermath. That night, they kissed until both were breathless, until Ethan's whole body shook with wanting. Yet Clara still held back the final step, still left him simmering. As he left her apartment, she leaned in close and whispered, "You're almost ready." The words haunted him all night. Almost ready for what? Ethan could no longer deny it. Clara consumed him. She lived in his veins, in the corners of his thoughts, in the restless ache of his nights. Every glance, every word, every deliberate pause from her carried more weight than anything else in his life. And yet, he sensed something shifting. The closer he drew to her, the more dangerous the pull became. A sudden distance. It began with silence. One evening, Ethan arrived at Clara's door, only to be met with a cool expression. She let him in, but the warmth that usually softened her gaze was gone. "You're late," she said flatly. "Only 10 minutes, Ethan replied, confused. 10 minutes is 10 minutes, she countered, moving past him. The words stung more than he expected. He watched as she poured herself a drink without offering him one, her posture sharp, her tone colder than usual. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked finally. Her eyes flicked toward him. "You tell me." Ethan's chest tightened. I don't know. That's the problem." Clara's voice was low, almost disappointed. "You're waiting for me to tell you everything, to guide you in every step. But part of this part of us is about you taking initiative. If you can't, maybe you're not ready after all." The words cut deep. Ethan felt heat rise in his chest, shame, frustration, and a desperate fear of losing her. A clash. "I am ready," he said firmly. Her brow arched. "Prove it." The air thickened between them, silence stretching until Ethan finally stepped forward, closing the distance. His hands gripped her waist, firmer than before, pulling her closer. Clara's lips parted slightly, but she didn't yield at once. "Better," she whispered. "But is this you, or is this just what you think I want?" Ethan froze, her question slicing through his certainty. For the first time, frustration surged. "Why do you always make me feel like I'm failing?" Clara's gaze sharpened. "Because I want you to grow." "Do you want easy comfort, Ethan, or do you want something real?" Her words hit him harder than a slap. He realized she wasn't cruel, she was pushing. Testing. But it didn't make it easier to bear. Walking away. That night ended in tension. Clara kissed him once, brief and restrained, then turned away. "Go home," she said softly. Ethan left, his chest heavy, his mind spiraling. For the first time since meeting her, he wondered if this was too much, if he was in over his head. But the thought of losing her was worse than the ache of her distance. The spiral. Days passed with little word from Clara. Ethan tried to distract himself with work, with friends, but nothing filled the void. Every vibration of his phone sent a jolt through him, every silence dragged heavier. He replayed their last words, her disappointed tone, her cold distance. Was she done with him? Or was this another test? The uncertainty gnawed at him. The return. When Clara finally called, her voice was calm. "Come over." Just 2 words, yet Ethan's chest flooded with relief. He arrived quickly, nervous but determined. This time, Clara greeted him with a faint smile. Not warm, not cold, measured. "You came," she said. "Of course," Ethan breathed. "Even after I pushed you away?" "Yes." Her lips curved slightly, as though this was the answer she expected. "Good." Breaking the barrier. That night, Clara didn't test him with silence. Instead, she pushed harder, further. "You've been waiting for me to set all the rules," she said, standing before him, her blouse loose, her hair falling in waves. "But sometimes, I want to see what you'll do without being told. Do you understand?" Ethan nodded. "Then show me." The weight of her gaze pressed down on him. For once, he didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, kissed her firmly, and didn't stop when she tested his resolve. His hand slid to her waist, pulling her closer, his movements bold yet careful. Clara let out a soft sound of approval, not surrender, and kissed him back with new heat. When she finally pulled away, her eyes burned into his. "Yes," she whispered. "That's what I wanted." The first real breakthrough. The night unfolded in waves of intensity. Clara let him take more initiative, but she never surrendered control completely. Each step forward was balanced by her subtle restraint, a reminder that this was still her rhythm, her world. At one point, she guided his hands to her shoulders, then stepped back, leaving him breathless with the sudden loss. "You burn quickly," she said softly. "But you're learning." Her approval felt like a reward greater than anything else. The storm outside. Rain began to fall outside, heavy and relentless, drumming against the windows. They sat together on the couch, her body leaning against his, her voice low. "Do you know what I fear most, Ethan?" she asked suddenly. He shook his head. "Boredom." Her eyes flicked to his. "I don't want ordinary. I don't want safety. I want intensity, risk, fire. If you can't give me that, then this ends here." Ethan's breath caught. "I can." "Can you?" she pressed, her hand sliding along his chest, her nails tracing lightly. "Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear?" Her challenge lit something inside him, a flame of defiance. He caught her wrist, not harshly, but firmly. "I'm not here to play safe," he said. For the first time, Clara's eyes widened slightly. Then, slowly, she smiled. "Good," she whispered. "Then maybe you're finally ready." The promise. They didn't cross the final line that night either. Clara kept the edge sharp, the hunger alive. But the barrier between them had cracked. Ethan felt it, the shift, the promise of what was coming. When he left, rain still pouring down, Clara's final words echoed in his head. Next time, no holding back. The following evening carried a sense of inevitability. Ethan walked through the city as though pulled by an invisible thread. Every step toward Clara's apartment felt heavy with meaning. Her last words, next time, no holding back, rang in his ears, a challenge and a promise wrapped together. When she opened the door, he barely recognized the expression in her eyes. Not cold, not testing, but waiting. "Come in," she whispered. The final test. The apartment glowed with warm lamplight, the faint scent of jasmine lingering in the air. Clara closed the door behind him, leaning against it as though she had been expecting him for years. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. "Yes." His voice was steady, more than it had ever been. Clara studied him for a long moment, her silence deliberate. Then she nodded once. "Show me." Unlike before, Ethan didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, closing the distance, his hands finding her waist, his lips capturing hers with firm conviction. Clara responded instantly, her fingers sliding into his hair, pulling him deeper. But this time, Ethan didn't simply follow her rhythm. He created his own. He pressed her back gently against the door, kissing her with hunger, with urgency, with fire he had been holding for too long. Clara broke the kiss with a soft laugh, her breath hot against his lips. Finally. Fire and gravity. They moved together through the apartment, their kisses urgent, their bodies drawn like magnets. The restraint of the past weeks shattered every pause, every denial, every test had led here. Ethan's hands explored her freely now, no longer trembling with hesitation. Clara allowed it, encouraged it, though her control never fully disappeared. She guided his movements with subtle touches, with whispered words, but she no longer pulled away. When they collapsed onto the couch, Clara straddled him, her blouse slipping loose from her shoulders. Ethan's breath came in sharp gasps, his hands gripping her tightly. "You've been holding back," she whispered against his ear. "Not anymore." Her answering smile was wicked and approving. Vulnerability. For all the intensity, there were moments of stillness too. Clara pressed her forehead to his, their breaths mingling, her hand cupping his jaw gently. "Do you know why I pushed you so hard?" she murmured. Ethan swallowed, his chest tightening. "To see if I was strong enough." "Yes. But also, to see if you would break. Because I can't give myself to someone fragile, someone who only wants comfort. I need fire. I need someone who can take the storm I carry." Her voice trembled on the last word, and for the first time, Ethan sensed the vulnerability beneath her strength. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered. Clara searched his eyes, and something in her gaze softened, not surrender, but trust. The flood. The rest of the night blurred into heat and motion, a release of every restrained desire. Their bodies tangled, their voices low and raw. Ethan felt both powerful and powerless, consumed by Clara yet giving as much as he took. At one point, she whispered fiercely against his neck, "Mine." And he answered without hesitation, "Yours." The word sealed something deeper than passion, a bond forged in fire and patience, in struggle and surrender. Afterglow. Hours later, they lay together in silence, the room still heavy with the scent of sweat and jasmine. Clara rested against his chest, her hair spilling across him in dark waves. "You've changed," she whispered finally. So have you, Ethan replied softly. Her lips curved faintly. No. I've only revealed myself. You're the one who grew into it. He held her tighter, understanding at last that this wasn't about dominance or submission alone. It was about trust. About daring to step into the unknown and finding someone waiting there. A morning after. When Ethan woke to sunlight streaming through her curtains, Clara was already awake, watching him. Still here, she teased. Of course. Good, she murmured, pressing a kiss to his shoulder. Because I'm not finished with you yet. The promise in her tone made his chest swell. The uncertainty that once haunted him was gone, replaced with something fiercer belonging. Epilogue. Weeks turned into months, and their rhythm deepened. Clara still challenged him, still tested him, but no longer from distance. Now it was from within the bond they had built. Ethan no longer doubted himself around her. He had grown, sharpened, learned to hold his ground, and Clara respected him for it. They weren't ordinary, and they didn't want to be. Their love was a storm, intense and consuming, but it was theirs. And in that storm, Ethan found the one thing he had been searching for all along, not just passion, not just direction, but purpose. End of story. Clara had once told him she feared boredom most of all. With Ethan, she never had to fear it again. And for Ethan, the boy who had once felt lost, Clara had become both the fire that burned him and the anchor that kept him whole.